coming up.
They told us what happened, and we were just like, "It's okay, like, you guys imagined it, blah, blah, blah." To this day, they swear by it. Swear by it, both of them, separately.
Wait a
So,
second. Wait a second. Were you gaslighting them
yeah.
even though you knew you'd had crazy experiences yourself?
I didn't really wanna believe it, like, plus
Yeah, I
as
grew
a
up with
big
all these
sister.
scary things happening. When these kids said it, though, I'm like, nah, you guys are dumb. Shut up.
No, I mean, he's like, as an older sibling, I'm like, "Okay, what am I supposed to do?" Like, "You're right, this house is haunted as heck. Go to sleep now." Like, "No, I was gonna
You're right.
I
You're
was
right. You're
gonna
right.
like"
You're right. You're right. Duh. Welcome to Unholy Vibes. It's me again, Alex, your host, your one, your only. And today we're joined by a very special guest, Cass. I'm assuming short for Cassandra?
Cassandra, but very,
Yeah.
very
Oh,
close.
well, I had to start over. No, no, that's fine.
No,
Cassandra.
you're good. You can never
Cassandra.
fight on a pink train.
I should have asked beforehand. I'm bad at this.
No, it's
So,
been a lifelong thing.
so we met on TikTok, which has been a trend of my season 2 guests. A lot of TikTok people.
Mhm,
And it wasn't even your live. We were on the live of someone else, and they were having people join to share their
mhm.
scary stories. S
Yes.
We're talking about Frankie Prescott. They're live right now. I wanna join and be like, "Yo." But, I'm actually recording with them this Friday, so that'll be cool.
Oh, right?
Satanic_Hispanic 666. That's the one.
Do it in.
Yep. I spend a lot of time on TikTok just networking, if you will, because a
Yeah.
lot of people have stories and I wanna hear them. When Frankie was live and it was like 11:30 at night or something, and I'm just sitting there listening to people tell their stories, and it was back to back to back, different guests or guest, co-hosts, whatever you wanna call them,
Mhm.
joining their live, and you'd come on and were telling some stories, and I caught most of it, but I was immediately
Okay.
like, "I wanna have that story on my show." So, I DM'd
Yep.
you, we messaged even in the live a little bit. I got, like, 5 other people from that live, I feel like, that were like, "I'll come on your show." So, you're here now,
Absolutely.
we've been chatting. I'm really
Mhm.
happy that you're here. Thank you for taking the time
Yeah.
to, come on the Unholy Vibes podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself, tell the people who you are, what you do, and then, we'll dive into your story, have a little bit of discussion around it, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, one, thank you for inviting me on. This is my podcast debut, and I don't know, I've been looking forward to this. It's been something really fun. So, yeah, as you said, my name is Cassie or Cass, whatever floats your boat, and I work in administration. So I work at a paralegal law firm, and I also work at a tax and accounting law firm. So, kind of a simple life. I live in a very, very small historic mining town with my little guy, just my son and I. So it's actually just a really great, small, quiet life that I have crafted for myself. So a lot of these stories, because I know that you caught the one about me growing up, but I think there's another one that you probably didn't catch where my girlfriends and I went on vacation. So if you wanted to hear that one later on, let me know. But
I
yeah, a lot of these
I want them all.
stories.
I want them all.
Absolutely. A lot of these stories are from me growing up, and I've always had experiences, but I grew up in a very Catholic household, so they weren't always discussed or welcomed. So now I'm in my adult years. I kind of like having that discussion more and seeing other people's experiences and comparing them to mine or getting people's ideas or takes. So, yeah, it's really nice finding this community on TikTok and now Discord to discuss with.
I find a lot of people have good stories, but
Mhm.
don't really have a good outlet to tell them. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
"I'm here for you, please." So
Yeah.
yeah, I try and find anyone and everyone, and I scroll through lives nonstop. I'm like, "Have you ever seen a ghost? Tell me about it." And a lot of people are like, "I'm here doing a makeup thing or a cosplay thing," but they're like, "Hold up, stop the show." They'll stop everything they were doing with 300 guests that were there for that thing, and they're like, "I have to tell this story really quick." I'm like, "Yeah, ruin someone's
Wait.
life," you know? I love it. I've been saying this all season. I am in it for the love of the game. I love scary stories, supernatural or not. I break the ice with "Have you seen a ghost?" But if it's
Yeah.
not supernatural, I'll still take it. My first episode of this show is not a supernatural scary thing. and there's
Mm.
others that are not. Killers, stalkers, aliens, ghosts, demons, whatever. I'll take all of it. I had an I had a story about a dude living in someone's attic secretly. That was weird and terrifying. Yeah. So anyway,
I
enough of my nonsense. Please dive in, tell us your stories, spare no details. I want everything and everything in between, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead and I will try my best to save my questions for the end, but no promises.
No, it's fine. I feel like you and I conversate kind of the same, so you interrupt whenever it fits your fancy.
We're doomed. We're
Oh
doomed.
no, this is the longest podcast ever. No, I'm just kidding.
Uh, I've had some that were 3 hours long that I'm like, I gotta cut this down a little bit.
You gotta do more editing. Yeah. Oh, sorry, my dogs are joining in, so they bumped the camera.
It's all good.
I foster dogs. I have 4 in the house right now, but I have a little puppy going to his foster at his forever placement on Monday. So be
Nice.
back down to 3. But yeah, so I'll hop right in. I would say my first experience was I was very, very young, probably around 4 years old. One of like my first and early childhood memories, but someone saying my name. And I was just standing there playing with something. And all of a sudden, I heard my name, and it was Cassandra. And it was so maternal and it was so loving. And I told my grandma, who was standing in the kitchen, and she actually is the one who like raised me up. And I said, Grandma, someone just said my name. And she said, Well, what did it sound like? And I sang it to her. And then I said, But was great grandma? And she just kind of paused because it was the grandchild that my great grandmother never got to meet.
Mm.
She passed away suddenly when my mom was very pregnant with me. So it was a sweet moment that I like to look back on, and it brings me a lot of love in my heart. And it shows me that you can have negative paranormal experiences and you can have some really beautiful ones. And that was probably one of the more beautiful ones. The rest of my stories, I wouldn't say they're like necessarily sad. Some are, but I wouldn't say they're like really happy either. So that one I really like to hold on to, and it's just very comforting to me.
A great way to start the show. Let's start with the sweet stuff. Now we're gonna get to the little more
Now we're gonna go to the spooky spooky.
maybe we should have saved that as a palate cleanser, you know? Just like,
Right? Yeah.
yeah,
Put that back in a little later if you want. Absolutely. So I grew up with my grandmother in the house with my grandfather and my older brother. And that house is where they also raised my mother and my 2 aunts. I'm the second generation to live in that house. And I actually grew up in my mom's old bedroom. So, definitely my mom still had her energy in there and stuff. It's where she was a teenager. It's where she grew up. So it was actually really nice being able to share that with her 100%.
that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing about my mom, I love her, but multifaceted this woman was. Later on in life, started hanging around with the wrong crowd, I would say. And she ended up bringing, and this is where the whole tale kind of starts. She ended up bringing a Ouija board in.
Oh, okay.
And I know it's like dun dun dun. So she brought a Ouija board in the house, and she was also hanging around some people in the occult. And mind you, my grandma is one of the most Catholic grandmas you've met. My first communion photo is still on the fireplace mantle. So she was not Jimmy Jam with all this stuff going on. She was actually pretty upset. She was not having a good time. So yeah, there's a Ouija board in the house. My mom, I love my mom. She was a great person, but we all make mistakes in our younger years. She got into some occult stuff. My grandma said that she found a really old coven related book. There was an amulet she found because they were having a lot of activity at the time. And she ended up calling a deacon in from the church to bless the house. But that was before I was even born. I don't have the tea on those tales, but I can do like what I experienced in relation to what my mom had brought in the house in her younger years. Yeah. Oh, it's like so we're talking about it. I was burning incense to clear the energy. Whenever I talk about it, I get the heebie-jeebies.
There's a whole lot that goes into that. Just talking about something can bring a vibe, right?
It's like,
For someone like me, I am a person that's Probably sound like a broken record to anyone who listens to this show. They say this every episode, but I don't have any experience, very few experiences. I'm not sensitive on a spiritual level, if you will,
Yeah.
where other people are like, I can't stop having experiences
Mhm, mhm.
without being sensitive to these things. You can't avoid the vibe that talking about scary things brings. Whether you're
Yes,
alone or with 10 people, it just happens. You have to clear the
it does.
air afterwards. Bring out
Yes.
something else or watch cartoons, just a palate cleanser
Mhm.
to a little refreshment, It's it's
Yeah.
it's interesting how that works. Your body just holds on to these things. It's like you need to do something
True.
to let it go. Please
It's so
continue.
true. Energy is a very real thing. It's very much a part of us as human beings. There is a lot of energy flying around the house when this stuff was happening. I'm not the only one to experience this. So I think I've had skeptics say to my face, like, you're mentally ill, you're crazy, that didn't happen, whatever. And I'm like, listen, this is so corroborated. My adult friends who are in amazing careers, my siblings still tell the same tale that they told when they were younger. Had friends for at that point over 5, 6, 7 years. And in high school, you're always living at each other's friends' houses.
Yeah.
My grandma was so cool about having our friends over. Like we were that fun house in the neighborhood. So for my friends not to spend the night at my house because it freaked them out so bad, all these things kind of tell me it wasn't just me. So I think like
Yeah.
the first,
You're
yeah,
like you're like, "My mental illness has nothing to do with it."
right. I'm not saying I don't have one. I'm just saying it didn't cause the ghost story.
Yeah, I may be mentally ill, but I'm not the only one experiencing this. Um,
Right.
that's
Like there's
funny.
too many people that have experienced stuff for me to be like, yeah, that's like whatever. So, but gosh, I'm trying to think of like my first experience with this thing because growing up, the house always felt heavy. And some days it was just light and beautiful. And then some days it was like just muck. Like it just felt like muck in the air and heavy. So this thing I used to like it would appear a lot in shadow figures because there was an entity in the house that came with the Ouija board and all that stuff happening. And I was actually on the phone with my little sister tonight, and she was telling me some precursors about it. So it was my mom and her best friend, and they brought this Ouija board in the house and they asked who it was, and it gave a name of someone that had a very bad like domestic violence situation with, and he had since then passed away. So from the get-go, this entity was like just trying to get a rise out of us. It was hitting where it hurts because after that, my mom, she didn't close out the board. I've never used a Ouija board, but she never closed out the board and she ended up like throwing it in the trash. Well, per the family tale, that Ouija board ended up back in the closet,
Hmm.
which I'm like, okay, that's pretty freaky. Okay,
You always
moving
have to
on. That's
say
hard.
goodbye. You have to say goodbye
Yeah,
and end it all.
absolutely. It was just waiting for her to be polite, really. Yeah,
Poor manners, I'm gonna haunt your ass.
I think that's what it was. I think my mom not
Mm.
having manners with this ghost maybe is potentially why it haunted me. 'Cause I really do feel like it was passed down to me in a way.
Generational trauma. Let's go.
Literally. And I don't know if it's because maybe we shared the same room growing up, and I look a lot like my mother in her teen years. So I don't know if it maybe got me confused with my mom or if it just really stuck around the house that long. So this thing really started showing itself when I was in like my high school years. And before that, I used to hear a lot of grunts and growls. I was really too afraid. And this is my teen years in high school, like too afraid to even like go out to the hallway to use the bathroom in the middle of the night because I just knew it was out there. I just knew it
Mhm.
was there. Like you could feel it. And my sister says the same thing. She used to hate having to leave that room in the middle of the night because that house is just like pitch black, which is important to know that that house is really pitch black. So whenever I felt it in the room or I felt it in the house or my hallway door was open, I could see like something darker than dark in the hallway. And you can just feel that feeling. I used to just like, as a child, say so many Hail Marys and just hold the covers over my face until I fell asleep. And a lot of nights I fell asleep that way. So this actually was pretty like psychologically draining and emotionally draining on us. And like I said, some weeks it was really happy in the house, and then some weeks it was just terrible. And I really do feel like this thing like feasted on anger and like depression and sadness. And I really do feel like it contributed to that because as an adult, when I visit the house, it's massively different. The energy's different. It's not heavy. So I think one the big experiences I had with this thing was, man, I was doing my junior year homework for Miss Kirkwood's class. And it was like something about one of the Shakespeare plays. But I was working on a class project and the TV was in front of me in the cabinet, but it was off. So it was just a black screen and it could cast a projection. Okay. Yeah, it's such a big story. I'm like having a hard time finding like where to pinpoint. But yeah, these were the two big like scary instances. But yeah, so I was doing a project for Miss Kirkwood's class. It was like my junior year of high school. And it was like about Shakespeare or something. And I remember I was very, very, very calm because I wanted to make that a point. Because a lot of people think, well, maybe they watched like a scary movie right before this happened or like a ghost show and they were like scared. No, I was 100% like focused on my homework. Like my mental state was so calm. And it made it so weird. So the black TV screen is in front of me. And then all of a sudden, I see this blacker than black, lanky figure just saunter across very slowly the TV screen, just saunter. And its arms are moving like this. And with where that reflection was, that should have been right in front of my face. So at this point, I was having so many weird experiences and it was really affecting me emotionally that I really followed the old telltale old advice, which is don't be scared, don't give it your energy, tell it to back off. So I just really stopped reacting. And I think that's why it started showing itself like this because I wasn't powering at every little thing it was doing anymore. So it sauntered across the street, and I went and grabbed my grandpa real fast. And I said, Pop Pop, I just saw that thing again. And they all thought I was like crazy. I'm like, I just saw that thing again. And I was like really trying to troubleshoot where this could have come from. I was really trying to prove that it wasn't this weird entity in my house. So I was like, is there something in the backyard? Maybe it somehow reflected from the back windows to the TV, which is totally not probable. But I was thinking of anything. So kind of let that one go. I was like, all right, not going to pay attention to it, whatever. And then the second experience happens, and this one really sticks with me because I think this is probably around 18, 19 when this happened. And like I said, I really wasn't giving it my energy because this had been happening all the time I was growing up. So sometimes I feel like it would go away and then it would come back. And sometimes it was just really like you could just feel it heavy in the air. So this time I was walking down the hallway pitch black at night to go get like a cup of water. And as I was walking out to the kitchen, because here's like our hallway and then the living room breaks off over here and keep going straight, it's the kitchen. I see this thing sitting on the couch. And like I said, it's blacker than black. So this thing had to be 6.5, 7 feet tall because it was just so lanky. I mean, its elbows, like it was sitting like this. It was like slouched. And then its forearms were so long, its elbows were touching the couch cushion. And it
Mm.
had a very long torso. So this thing was lanky and long, and it was just sitting there like this with its hands draped over the side, just staring. And well, it didn't have a face, but it was just like straight ahead. And the weird thing about this too was on the top of its head, you know how the chickens have that red thing on the top of their head? It had something like that. And like I said, this was blacker than black. So it's a pitch black living room, and this thing is void black. Like, I don't even know black matter black. It was just the blackest black you could get. And it was really, really unsettling. So I just went and got my cup of water and I turned on the light and I left it on and then I went back to bed. But I wasn't the only one to have experiences with it. Those were my like two big experiences. But my little sister and I'm gonna call him my little brother, how like we have those family friends. It's my godmother's son, and he always would come over for sleepovers and stuff. We lived on the same street. So my little sister, my little brother, and I think my little sister is about, I want to say I was 12 or 13, and she's like 5 years younger than me. So they're pretty young. And they still recount this to this day. They saw from my grandma's room a black, lanky claw hand grip around the side of the door frame. And Colin and I were playing the Wii, like the first generation. And
Shout out to the Wii.
shout out to the Wii.
We love it.
And, yeah, we were just hanging out. It was probably like real late. Like we were just having a sleepover and they came booking down that hall, screaming bloody murder. Like they were freaked out. Like Colin, Colin, Tay, Tay, and they like couldn't get their words out. So finally they told us what happened, and we were just like, it's okay, like you guys imagined it, blah blah blah. To this day, they swear by it. Swear by it, both of them, separately.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Were you gaslighting them
Yeah.
even though you knew you'd had crazy experiences yourself?
I didn't really wanna believe it, like like,
Yeah, I
as
grew
a
up with
big
all these
sister,
scary things happening. When these kids said it though, I'm like, "Nah, you guys are dumb. Shut up."
nah, you guys are fake. No, I mean, it's like, as an older sibling, I'm like, "Okay, what am I supposed to do?" Like, "You're right, this house is haunted as heck. Go to sleep now." Like, no,
You're right.
I
You're
was
right. You're
gonna
right.
like
You're right. You're right. Duh.
I
Why?
feel like I would've gotten in trouble for that, like, the house is haunted, like,
Yeah.
"What did you tell your sister?"
Gaslighting for good. Gaslighting for the good, the better, the greater good.
It was pretty good.
That's
It was
so
pretty
funny.
good of the people in that
You
house
you
that
bring up a great point. Like, what are you supposed to do? Scare the shit out of them? I
I was scared, like,
so that'd be like one of your kid coming in and be like, "There's a monster in my closet." I'm like, "You bet there is. I don't want to go look at that. That's
that
scary."
Monsters Inc. is training season right now. I'm sure there's one in your closet.
Woof. That's funny. Sorry. Okay,
Oh,
so you tell them, "No,
no, we're good.
you're not. It's not real. You're just imagining it. Go back to bed." And
Right.
they're terrified. And
They're terrified. And they're both in their mid-20s, and they still will swear by that story every time. And they'll always talk about how, because the best friend my mom did the Ouija board with was my little brother's mom, my god. And he'll even tell stories. So yeah, it was just really kind of like a lot. And like I said, it made the energy just feel mucky and heavy. And a lot of my friends didn't really like hanging out at the house. And to this day, and my friends are very put together people, like more than me. And they say, yeah, we did not like hanging out at your house as a kid. And they said, no, Cassie's not lying about that. I know it sounds really crazy and outlandish, but it's totally true. So it's like a very heavily corroborated story by multiple people, different age groups, like all throughout the years. And it's just really the most bizarre thing. So in college, it really started ramping up again. And like I said, I do really think this thing definitely affected our moods. I think whenever we were like fighting as a family or having a hard time individually, it was like feasting. It was like a hometown buffet for this thing. So it's very, very bizarre. But like I said, in college, it really started ramping up again. And there are points which during this time, my mom did pass away, which is a very big key factor. I was 19 in college when I found out
mm,
suddenly, and she had lived out of state because like I said, I was raised by my grandparents. But we are still very, very close with my mom. And after she had passed within this 2-week period, I remember I had like a college boyfriend at the time. I remember like calling him over because I was sitting on the doorsteps of my house because I was so scared to go in alone. And I was 19 years old, like too old to be that freaked out by something. But something in my gut was telling me, like, do not go in there. I was really scared. And I knew what it was because it had a very, very specific feeling. Like
mhm.
when you felt this feeling, you knew exactly what it related to. So yeah, I had him come over and sit with me on the stoops at 19 years old until like my brother came home. So I just refused to be in the house by myself. And yeah, 2 weeks to the date, and this is probably on public record somewhere, 2 weeks to the date that my mom passed away, I was home alone. Not my favorite thing at that time, but home alone. And I was getting ready to like take a shower for the night. And all of a sudden, the house just felt like an explosion of energy inside. And this thing was like looming. It was there, but it was more intense than I've like ever felt it before in my life. And it was like spiritual warfare was going on out there. And things were weird because I was in the restroom, but I could hear dishes clanking, papers flying and rustling, the cats running up and down the hallway. I don't know where the dogs were. I don't remember dogs barking, but the cats were 100% reacting. My grandma was a cat lady. So just really something was weird. And this is the first time at that point that I had ever called 911. So it had to take a pretty big experience for you to make your first 911 call. Everyone kind of remembers their like first call in. And I really thought someone was in the house because of all the commotion I was
Yeah,
hearing, and
yeah.
it just felt so unsafe. So I ended up calling 911, and my grandma got home in her white minivan before the cops did, which I'll always remember that part of the story. She like swooped in that driveway before the police even made it there, like in her white caravan minivan. But yeah, the police got there and they went in and they cleared the house. And I like put my robe on and stuff and went out. And they were like, "Hey, no one's in the house." And I was like, "Okay." But it was like they also picked up on something because they were literally like, "Yeah, it's weird in here, but it's raining and there's no boot prints."
Mm.
They said it feels disturbed in here. It does, and the animals are all out of sorts. And there's some young officers, you can see them just looking around and like nodding their head. Like I feel like they were really picking up on the thing that was in there. And ever since that night, it has never felt the same. Like the house has felt so much lighter. And my friends will even come over in their adult years and say, "Yeah, your house feels like completely and totally different now." So I don't know what it was. They can spend the night now, but we all have our own houses now. So
I was gonna say
you know,
sleepover time. Let's go. Make up for lost
yeah,
time.
but yeah, so ever since that day, the house has just been calm. It's what it felt like on the good weeks when we were very like loving, very tight knit family. And I think maybe my grandma and grandpa have their experiences with this, but they're older generation and very, very religious people from different religions. And I think this was just a very uncomfortable point for them. I think my grandma believed in it, but I think she had a really hard time discussing it. And because I know that she called the deacon in. I know that she used to get like the holy oil when she felt it, but she just would like never discuss it with me. So I think it's something that made her like completely very uncomfortable. And my brother too. My brother's gonna see this and be like, "I'm not watching it." Like he doesn't do the whole ghost thing.
I found that with older generations and people who are
Mhm.
very deeply religious, they don't want to
Yeah.
talk about it because to talk about it is bad
Yeah.
enough, right?
Yes.
And I see where they're
Mhm.
coming from because, like we talked about earlier, when you talk about things, you bring that energy in. But there
Mhm.
is, I think there's a power in normalizing it, being like it's a
Mhm.
thing, but I'm not scared of
Brushing it
it.
off.
Be like it's
Yeah.
there, but I'm not gonna let
Right.
anything happen to me, kind of thing. And so they were very much like,
Absolutely.
"Don't even mention it, don't even talk about it, under the rug,"
Right.
kinda thing, but later generations and, like, people around our age, future generations too, I think they're gonna be more comfortable discussing things like this and
I think so.
taking some of the juice out of it, if you will. So,
Yeah.
them's my thoughts.
I think so too. I was just like scientifically thinking about it because you said yourself like you have never had an experience, right? But it like really intrigues you. And I think you have such a good outlook on it because usually when people don't have experiences, they're like, "You're crazy." Like just kind of like can't understand where you're coming from. So they just really can't enter into that comprehension. And, I've had a lot of experiences like that, but I think it's like what statistically, I can't remember the exact percentage, but we only use what 10-20% of our brain. So who's to say we all use that same percentage in the same areas? There be maybe some people that may be naturally more sensitive to this stuff than others. And I think it's just something to take into consideration if you haven't had experiences. Doesn't mean they're out there. I just think everyone's a little bit different upstairs. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
100% agree, and so I grew up religious, I'm still religious, and so that explains some of my outlook, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, still not but that's kind of going with what you're saying. I don't have a very spiritually sensitive radar, if you will, or whatever. But then, like, I
Yeah.
have a buddy, I have a few buddies, and I've met people just for the show even that are like, "Oh, yeah, dude, I feel things, I see things pretty often. And I'm like, well, who am I to say that you're not feeling those things or hearing
Yeah.
or seeing those things? There's so much more that we don't know than we do.
Absolutely.
And it's, yeah, maybe there's nothing, but also there's a lot of something out there. Like, so,
Oh, there is.
so I have my beliefs, but even just looking at it, like putting my beliefs aside and saying, okay, objectively, there's just a lot we don't know. So who's to say?
There is.
Who's to say? That's really what it comes down to. I'm not gonna tell you that you didn't experience the thing because a lot of
Mhm.
people are like, oh, they're full of it, they're lying. It's like, why? What's the point of lying about
Yeah.
that? It's not fun or
Right.
cool.
I'd lie about something way cooler.
Yeah. Or like me, it's like I don't have a reason to lie about anything. I'm not a liar. I just am not. And people are like, yeah, whatever, you probably lie. It's like I can. I'm good at it if I wanted to, but it's more for like silly goose. And I don't hold to any of it. I don't try and commit. And it's like the whole paranormal, supernatural, all of that. Like I'm sure there are some people that do it just for the spectacle of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people that I
Yeah.
meet with, they would not have talked about this otherwise.
Right.
So I'll just take it. I'll take it. And there if you ever go and listen or watch any of my other episodes, you'll see, I mean, I have my healthy skepticism here and there. And there have been people that I've met
Mhm.
with in person where they're like, my house is haunted or whatever. And I've gone with them and like, talk to me about this, show me. And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I want to believe, but also like a lot of the things you're saying and the things you've showed me are very easily disproven. And
Right.
I don't want to be like purely skeptical, but I don't want to be just purely like, I'll take it, you know?
Correct. Yeah, because I think if you do have experiences and you're like excited to have more, that yeah, you may, unintentionally gaslight yourself, like how's it goes? But really it was just, I don't know, something really simple.
And
Absolutely.
I am not a magnet for those kind of things. I want to believe all of these things, but I may
Yeah.
not. I could go into the most haunted building in America and I just don't
Yeah.
think anything would happen. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you haven't
Yeah.
had your experiences. So, in
Right.
a nutshell, the message of all this is if you're a skeptic, just you can be a skeptic, but don't be a dick about it.
Yeah. Be a nice skeptic. Have good
Yeah.
energy.
Yes, yes. Let people have their fun. Come on.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Bro,
that was quite the
absolutely.
tangent. Please continue. Tell me
No,
more
it was great.
stories.
And I love a good tangent because, like you said, we don't really know everything. And I think for us to think that we know everything is just really foolish. Because if you think about it on a grand scheme of things, we are specks on a floating rock. We don't
Yeah.
really know much at all. We're still really researching our oceans. We're researching space. So, what's to say that, yeah, this shouldn't be an area of research? I think it definitely should be. And it is, but just to prove that, yeah, I think there's the spiritual and I think there's our physical world. And I think sometimes they overlap. I don't think it's all the time, but I feel like sometimes they do overlap. And in that little Venn diagram is where we have like all our little experiences. So I've had plenty more,
And
but oh, let's see which one you would like. Oh, wait, I did have another wholesome ghost story.
palate
Do you want
cleanser.
to hear
Yeah,
that one?
palate cleanser. Then dive into whatever
Okay,
other
let's do a little
paranormal you
palate
have.
cleanser. Yeah, so this one's actually really recent. It actually happened in this house, and I only owned this house for about like 3 years, I want to say. So I did this to myself. It didn't. It probably came pre-haunted, but none of them bothered me. But this one I did to myself. So as you know, like you probably heard the dogs around and stuff. I am an animal lover, and I do foster and rescue. More try to foster than rescue. But about a year and a half ago, a gentleman had passed away that had these two cats. So one of the cats I was able to get placed and I still see it around. But one of the cats just really, this loss for her was really hard. So I ended up keeping that cat and she settled in here just fine. But when I picked up the cats, I was really worried about them because, this man had passed away and they were found like literally on top of him, comforting him even after he had passed. And this is their second owner that has passed away with them. He was their second owner.
Dang.
So I was like, "You're staying with me. I'm gonna be around for a while." Sorry, Vernon, but
Jeez.
it's he has a name. And I had to talk to him because I don't know if I feel him around right now. But yeah, so I brought these cats home and I was really concerned about their transition because they had just gone through this terrible loss. And so I had asked for some clothing items, maybe a sheet or two, something with his scent on it so I could put it in their area. And yeah, I think old Vernon, 'cause that was the old guy's name, I think he totally followed those cats home with me because, like I said, I lived here a year and a half and I had never had these experiences. And I think he got used to my cat mothering and I have never had them again. So it was a very isolated period in this house to where these things were happening. And I had caught it on video before, but he loved to turn on my fan and he loved to turn on my dining room light. It was the light. Whenever I would walk by, he would love to pop on that light to
Mm.
let him know, "Hey, I'm watching you." And it usually was when I had my dogs around the cats because he didn't have any dogs. So I feel like this man's probably looming over me, like really upset. Get those dogs away from my cats. And that's how I can imagine it.
That's fun.
But yeah, I brought these cats home and all of a sudden my light would turn on by itself, turn off, the fan would turn on by itself, turn on. And mind you, this isn't a switch and I live alone. It's like a remote on the wall. And like I said, it hasn't happened since. And I haven't changed the batteries in that remote or anything. So it was pretty weird. He's definitely
Interesting.
changed like my TV channel. Yeah. And my Catholic grandma was here for that one. And I said, "Did you change the TV channel?" She said, "No." I said, "Where's the remote?" And we both looked and it was on the couch. And she's like, "That's odd." She's like, "Vernon needs to go home to God." And I was like, "Did you just acknowledge my old man ghost? Like, we're making progress."
I was gonna say, okay, I need a tour of your house now, please and thank you. Ghost hunting at your
Right.
place. Woo, let's go.
And yeah, I knew it had to be him because I didn't have any other electrical issues in that house. So I went out and checked my panel box. Everything is perfect. All my circuit breakers were working. I had no other like circuit breaks going, nothing. So it was very isolated just with like my lights and sometimes him changing the channel. And then I have those LED strip lights in my son's room, and those were completely off, and I couldn't find the dang remote. And by golly, I walked out of the restroom and they turned on. And it was like, oh my gosh. And sometimes I think this experience is probably one of the experiences that more affected me physically. Because one night I could feel him in here and he had just turned on the light. So I'll be like sitting on the couch when this happens. So I'm like, okay, he's around. But I got so nauseous. Like I've never felt just like the heaviness and the nausea set in before. And I told him, I was like, "Hey, I respect that you're here checking on your animals." And I usually don't talk out loud like this to the ghosties.
Yeah.
I usually don't give them my attention,
Yeah.
but I was like, "Hey, I really need you to give me some space because I'm not feeling the greatest right now." Like that, it just started dissipating. So
Wow.
he's very respectful, and it's definitely just because he cares about these cats 100%. But they've been with me, and one was adopted out. It's been about like a year and a half now. So moving on 2 years, I want to say. So yeah, he hasn't really been back too much. I feel like he got his answers and he moved on because from what I was told, this man was just attached to these cats. These are his babies. Like I even was emailing his ex-wife, giving her updates on these cats. Everyone was just like, "What about his cats? Like what about Blue and Silver?" So he was very, very attached to cats. So that was one of my more really wholesome ones. Again, corroborated. And he was just checking in on the kitty cats and he was really respectful of my space. And, if he wants to check in on them, he's like more than welcome to, because that's probably one of the good interactions I had. And I don't really have too many, like at this point.
Not a bad thing, right?
No, absolutely not. So that was like my fun one. And great cats. Thanks, Vernon. But
Wins all around, honestly.
absolutely. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think he was just judging my cat mom wife. I think he was really unhappy that my dogs were in the same house as him. So,
Just micromanaging
oh.
your cat watching, like, you gotta get him out of here. You're doing it wrong, you know?
No, absolutely. I'm like, "You know what, Vernon? You can at least pay the electricity bill if you want to have such strong opinions in
Yeah.
my house."
Quit turning my lights on, Vernon. It's not
Vernon,
cheap.
I'm like, "We live in California. Like, they're raising the prices. He better not start that again." So I don't know if I'll be able to financially recover.
Yeah, PG&E is, price hiking again. I can't do it. I can't.
No, no, and, like, this is why, because I used to live in LA County on the outskirts, and I ended up moving to this little town here because, oh man, the gang shootings that are going on, just like
No
the
thanks.
street that I grew up on. Like literally someone just got shot down the street. My grandparents still live there. I'm like desperately trying. I was like, "Oh, buy a back house for you. Come in with me."
Yeah,
So
yeah. Don't bring any of the
they were
demons with
crazy.
you though, you know?
No, I think my mom, oh, I didn't put that in. I think my mom really like came in the house and beat that thing's ass. Like that's kind of what it felt like, like she just came and like fought it off, kicked it out of the house once and for
Oh,
all.
really? So, your grandparents still are there, and they don't have
Yes.
any spooky experiences that they are at least talking about,
Not
which
the
not that they would, but
Not that they're gonna tell me about. I mean, my grandma did share a few experiences, so that's where I think I get my sensitivities from, is maybe the woman in the family, because I think it's very telling that, I can't prove it, but in my heart, I just knew when I was like around 3 or 4 and I had that first experience that it was my grandma. It was just
mhm,
factual. And I still feel like that to the day. That is my great grandma. But we had, unfortunately, way before my time, we did have a child loss on the property. My grandma did end up losing, very sadly, one of her grandchildren on the property. And she used to tell me, he used to tug on her for the end of her sweaters like he used to when he was living. And she would tell him he needs to go home to God. I think that's probably the only one I've really heard her talk about was in reference to my cousin that passed away as a child on the property. But usually she's pretty like closed off about it, and I think it's because she knows, like, if you feed it, it will, like,
yeah,
show up hungry.
yeah,
So I think it's more just her being very cautious. My grandpa, though, he was raised Mormon, and I don't really know because I was raised Catholic, but I feel like they just don't jimmy jam with the whole ghost thing. So he probably just was very uninterested.
that
But he was supportive of me. Like when I would get really scared, they wouldn't sit there and say like you're lying. They wouldn't like really want to discuss it heavily, but they did support me when it
right.
was like, you know, really just affecting me. Absolutely. But yeah, I think another one that you would really enjoy. It's kind of sad, but also like this was my like one of my oh my goodness like ghost experiences. Again, cooperated.
Yeah,
And I
let's
was
hear it.
actually this was a ghost experience setup. I was actually set up by my friends because they were hearing all these tales about my grandmama's house, right? That they're like, we're gonna test this.
Oh, boy. These are great friends you
It was
have.
oh no, they're amazing. I still have them to this day, and we still talk about the story like every time we're together. They're like, remember that one summer?
You're like, "Yeah, how could I
But
forget?"
how could I forget, really? So, yeah, how this happened, it was before I lost my mom, so I was about 18 because we just graduated high school. And one of my girlfriends was like, let's go visit my grandma up in Sonora, which you probably have heard of Sonora, California. It's a very, very like rural small town. And let's go spend the week there. She has a beautiful property. And it was the most beautiful property. Like the deer would come up. Like their grandpa gave me like food to feed the deer in the mornings. Like, oh, that was just the best time. And it was just nice hanging out with the girls. We were like getting all pretty and doing photo shoots in the yard and just being like 18-year-olds. But I guess something had happened in that house that they didn't tell me about. And they just wanted to see if I'd pick up on it.
Oh, boy.
So, and I did.
Really
So
putting you to the test.
and rightfully so. I mean, I was talking a lot of talk about my grandma's house. I mean, absolutely. So I went ahead and, we spent the weekend there and we ended up extending our trip because my friend's car ended up breaking down. But thankfully we were like at grandma's house and it's a good time.
Right.
But yeah, so I vividly remember this. I think I even remember the nail polish color I chose, but like we were doing our nails in the back room and plucking each other's eyebrows. And they had a back TV room, and then they had a galley kitchen that you could see through, and then it entered into the doorway. So something caught my eye, and all the lights are turned off, but something caught my eye down the galley kitchen. I could just see a movement. And I was like, huh. So I just started staring there because I have noticed whenever there is something and I'm drawn to a very particular area of the room and I'll just stare at it, it's usually like where it's hanging out. So I saw something move and then my eyes were just really directed towards this one spot. And all of a sudden, I saw something dart across the doorway and then dart back. I was like, I was like a fan on or something? Is it like catching a shadow? Like that's where, and then it darted back and darted back. And slowly, and I wasn't scared. Little uncomfortable, but I wasn't scared. Slowly, and this was a human form, but it was a black shadow. These fingers wrapped around the door frame, and someone peeked out like this, trying to get a peek at me,
Mm.
like surprised that I saw them. And I remember this woman's hair, it was a woman build, very small. And I remember this woman's hair is very choppy on the bottom. It was about this short and it was very choppy and a little disheveled. Then instead of darting, she started walking back and forth, but she would still like peek over at. And like I said, I didn't feel like in danger. And I didn't want to freak out my girlfriends because I was tired of being like the weirdo one that had all these weird experiences. So I just kept my mouth shut. It was like on a girls' trip, you know?
I don't like that.
We ended up, and we ended up like on the drive back. I was like, okay, I have to tell you guys something. It's like a 5-hour drive back. I was like, I have to tell you guys something. And they said, okay. So I told them what happened, and they both looked at each other. And I was like, what is going on here?
What's
What is
up?
going on? And they said, Cassie, like, we didn't tell you something because we wanted to see if you'd pick up on it. I was like, okay. And they're like, it was explained to me that the reason that the grandma and grandpa had gotten that house for a really good deal, and it was a beautiful property. And it was just so crazy to think like what I'm about to tell you would even happen in that neighborhood. But they said the reason they got this house for a good price is because there was like a homicide in the kitchen and the husband had shot the wife. And I was like, I think I saw the wife because she was hanging out in that doorway next to the kitchen. And you could tell that her energy was just like very unsettled and very confused. And I really truly do think that that's who I saw because this thing wasn't like an entity like I was explaining in my grandma's house. You could tell it was a woman. Like I could tell it was a black figure, but I could tell it was the shape of a woman with the hair. So that was one of my like really vivid experiences as well and pretty corroborated. And I wonder if I can even find a news story in reference to that homicide.
Please
And I
do.
really, really hope. Yeah, I'm gonna go look and I'm gonna go text her tonight actually. But I really hope that she has found some peace and moved on. I think my friends have had some other separate experiences in that house as well, but that one really stuck out to me, and that one kind of breaks my heart because I feel like she's just stuck there. So, I mean, it's been 10 years, 10 plus years since that happened, and my mind like always floats back to that woman. And I just hope like she found some peace and has moved on. Definitely. So, yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find a news article, and if I do, I'll send it to you.
Please, yeah, please
Absolutely.
do. I always
Yeah.
like getting the like extra content to go with the story. It's always a good time.
Yeah.
I've had people send me different videos or articles or whatever, and it's always like, yeah, that's what I wanted. That is wild. You've had a very affected life when it comes to these things. Great stories. These have been really good. I think you've told all of them that I heard. Are you holding back on me
Mm.
anymore or
Oh, man. I mean, there's always a few more. I wanna say one of the vivid ones was with my friends up in Washington. I don't know if you caught that segment at all when I was talking about, like, my military spouse friends, because I used to be married to a military member, so I lived on a couple of military bases. This one was up in Washington at Joint Base Lewis McChord on the Lewis installation. And there's actually a whole Facebook page dedicated to JBLM ghost stories,
oh
which I'm still a part of. So I'll see if I can find anything juicy for you.
please.
But this land was actually very unfortunately commandeered from the indigenous people that lived in that area. And when I lived there in 2017, we celebrated the centennial. So like 100 years of the installation moving there. But of course, they took some land that was very, very special to this tribe. There's a lot of like sacred land, and they were even still kind of like finding artifacts because there's just miles of forest on this base. And these houses that you live in, military housing, you have so many families that move through them and so much history. So these houses were actually very, very old. They were actually picked up from the main fort and then moved to the North Fort and placed on foundation. So these houses had a lot of history. And I think some of the structures even went back to like World War II. And we even had German like POWs on that base. So it was like, yeah, a lot of history there. A lot
Yeesh.
of history. Oh, yeah. So some of the stories that I'm gonna tell, there's like only a few that come to mind, but some are very, very much like Native American folklore type. So I'll kind of start with that one. So this one really, really scared. I'm still friends with her on Facebook, but it really unsettled that family. So how it was explained to me is it looked like the Grudge character, but the smile was too big for this woman's face. So it was like long black lanky hair, white skin, and a smile too large for the face is how it was described to me. And they had lived there for a bit, but I walked in there and I just felt unsettled. And I had brought it up to her. I was like, "Do you guys like have any experiences here or anything?" So I was like, "I just feel like I'm feeling something here." And she said, "Yes, actually." And she started telling me like about her neighbors' stories and stuff. And I really think this thing was attached to the land and the water because she actually lived right up against a lake on base. And I think that's like something that's told a lot. It's usually like water sources are like a natural source of energy for these things. And then if it's really attached to the land, I feel like it's just walking through wherever the heck it wants, people's houses, that whole area. So this one actually ended up really unsettling that family. They had 2 children at the time, brother and sister, and I want to say the older one was probably maybe about 7 at the time. His sister was younger, but those kids got so scared. And hello, I have a big brother. Like, you love your big brother, but it's like I just thinking if I was a little girl in that position, because they were so scared that they ended up sharing the bed again, is what I was told. Because this thing was just like freaking him out so much. And going back to like when I was a little kid, it would have to scare me really, really bad to go crawl in my big brother's bed. So yeah, it was really affecting them. And of course, like the husbands were all kind of these gruff, like artillery men in the military. So actually, they kind of like made fun of the wives whenever we had experiences. I want to say, not all of them, but from my experiences. So this particular guy, her husband was really not about all the ghost stuff. And how it was told to me is they were like in their bedroom chatting on the bed, and he had looked past his wife's shoulder into their walk-in closet and he saw it. And I was told that he said, "I see it right now and I'm not going to react. I see it." Not verbatim, that was the gist of what he said. So I was told that, and my ex-husband was pretty chummy with this guy. So for him to say that, I was like, oh my gosh. My ex-husband was like, maybe that he's right. Like for him to say that, that's pretty crazy. So she ended up going, we had like an elemental shop out there that had like a lot of pagan stuff, a lot of like natural stuff. So she ended up going and getting, I think, like a house cleansing sage and maybe some like stones or something, directed by the people who have lived in the PNW for a long time. And she said that it helped alleviate a lot. I guess they told her to like put certain stones in like corners of the room and like do this house blessing. And she said it helped a lot. But best believe on that street right by the lake, she was not the only family to have experiences. Not at all. And that one I wasn't there for. I will say the house seemed a little unsettled sometimes. But I mean, honestly, for this husband to like say he saw it, I was just
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like, that's crazy.
Have her reach out to me.
That's her.
I want to hear everything that happened to him.
You know what? I'll message her and tell her that this came up when I was talking ghost stories and if she'll share it. Absolutely.
I've heard a lot of stories from people that lived on military bases. My sister and
Mhm.
her husband's in the Navy. So they've lived on military bases for years and
Mhm.
she's always throwing me little tidbits. But yeah, I've got someone I'm waiting to pin down schedule wise and they've got like
Mhm.
tons of stories. I think
Oh
they're
my gosh.
haunted. I think whatever's going on, it's following them
Probably.
everywhere. But yeah, I can't wait to get more of these military stories because yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
history, there's a lot of energy. And I mean, I'm
Mhm.
not really well versed in the rocks and crystals. I don't want to just
Me
I'm
too.
not trying to rush you off or anything. Do you have any more highlights, any more tales to tell? I'd love to have more if they're your own personal tales. And if not, that's okay too. I'm not trying to
Well,
just squeeze you to
there's
death for stories.
Oh no, you're good. I'm trying to think. Like mine are so genuine, my experiences that I don't have like a plethora. I'm sure if I like maybe paid attention more, I would. But
Oh, man.
sometimes I think they're just a little over my head.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I thought about that. It's like,
Yeah.
I wonder if I do have things happening, I'm just oblivious to them.
Right. Like, show me a sign, God, and it's like right there, and you just like walk right past it. I
Yeah.
wonder if like that happens.
I like to think I'm self-aware enough and observant enough that
Yeah.
I'm not missing anything. I'm, like,
Right.
hyper aware, so maybe not, but maybe, yeah. Anyway.
Maybe. Well, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there has to be because, like I said, I live in a really tiny town, actually, really, really close to Death Valley, the national park. And I'm sure there's like hauntings going around this town. Like this house was built in like 53, so it's going on like 100 years in about 20 years.
No. My rule, and I'm gonna make a little graph for this. If it's
Okay.
pre-1970s, no thanks, because the older you get, the chance of a
Yeah.
haunting just gets really high. The exponential
Oh,
increase is insane.
I'm I'm sure, but it's like I'd probably give the ghosts a run for their money. I'm a little bit of a spitfire sometimes. I think if I did have the ghosts, they probably met their match with this mostly.
And here's the thing, you've had so many, like, genuinely scary experiences from your
Yeah.
grandparents' house, you're like, "What are you gonna do? Fight me," you know? So, there
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why I was like, with Vernon, I was like, oh my gosh, just turn the light off at least because like you're gonna rip the electricity bill. You're
Yeah.
not scaring
Yeah,
me.
yeah. These ghosts are all like that's another thing. Well,
I'm desensitized.
this is another thing you could explore is, like, the older a ghost
Yeah.
is, like, I feel like there might be a sweet spot of scary ghost where it's like, if you get
Yeah.
so old, they're just kind of like a primitive being anyway. Not primitive, but more old-fashioned.
Like they turn into senior citizen ghosts.
No, 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 no,
It's
no,
scary.
no, no. No, I mean, like, if they were, like,
No,
some
I
old
get it.
prospector, what are they gonna do? Like, they were just living a very basic
Like the soldiers you see in the South in the fields or something. Like they're just kind of there,
there, yeah.
but they aren't
There's
really
not
interacting.
yeah, the hauntings of, like, a geographic location with a lot of energy like that, for example, it's like, they're just there, I feel like, whereas if someone was brutally murdered in your home in the
Yeah.
last 30, 40, 50 years, they're gonna have a different vibe about them.
We live in a town with a town historian, and I feel like I'm gonna go get all the specs on my property.
Do it,
Absolutely,
do it.
because I don't even think like the county property tax record really started to the 70s. So there's probably like 20 years of history that I just probably don't know from this house. And there's definitely been additions on this house because I live, like I said, in a very small mining town. So these houses were built for the miners and for their families. So I'm definitely in one of those homes. And that's why everyone's a little different. Cause like this one, they added on a garage. Like one of my garage walls is stucco. So it was like definitely an outer wall that they like added on to. But I will find some ghost stories for you out here. Cause I know there are
Please,
some. And I
please
heard
do.
Manson used to hang out here too. There's a lot of Charles Manson lore.
I
Tons.
yeah. I,
Uh,
I would love to hear more stories like that too, because
yeah.
like I said, not everything has to be supernatural. If it's just like, "Yeah,
Right.
got to run in with a serial killer," great, tell me about it.
I didn't have any thankfully, he didn't that old saying, he didn't shit where he ate. So, like, I think he liked hanging out here. So, very thankfully, like, no murders were committed. But the ranch, the infamous ranch, is only like 2 hours that way. So,
Okay, goodness. Yeah, find more people for me to chat with because like I said, I'm in it for the love of
absolutely.
the game. I just like talking about it.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And
Yeah.
we could dive in to all sorts of different aspects. It's been
I do.
fantastic. If you I mean, if you have more stories, I'm open to it. If you want to go compile some local goodies and record again, I'm also open to that.
Yeah.
Cassie,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you. Everyone,
Uh,
follow
yeah.
Cass on TikTok, typically Cass. Give her a follow, give all her video likes, all that fun stuff. Remember, everyone, I'm in this for the love of the game. I want all the
Mhm.
stories. I want more. So if you are listening, or if you're watching and you have your own story or you know someone with a story, reach out to me. You can DM me
Mhm.
on TikTok or Instagram at Unholy Vibes Pod, or you can email unholyvibespod@gmail.com. I've had people submit stories anonymously for me to read off. So if you're too scared to come on and talk or be seen, I'm your guy. I can read it for you. So don't be scared. Reach out. Share the podcast with everyone and anyone who likes spooky stuff or fun stuff like this. Give it to
Yeah.
them. You never know who's going to reach out with the next great story. Cassie,
Mhm.
again, thank you.
Yay! Thanks for having me.
Be sure to check her out and be sure to check out my friend Liz at Resting Stitch
Mm.
Face at RSF Boutique. She's the one who makes the cool ghost girl things that I've worn. Check that out. If you reach out to her, let her know you came from Unholy Vibes. She'll give you a discount on your ghost
Mhm.
girl crew neck. So look for that. Thank you all for listening. You've all been wonderful. I love all of you. You're fantastic. Cassie, you've been fantastic. Remember, everyone, stay spooky, and we'll see you next time.